My hands trembled as I held the envelope, my name scrawled across it in jagged handwriting. I didn't recognize the writing, but the words inside cut deep. Your husband is not who you think he is. Ask him about Elise. Elise. My mind raced, my heart pounding. Derek wouldn't, he couldn't. I grabbed my phone, fingers fumbling. Jenna, it's me. We need to talk now. I paced the living room, bile rising in my throat as I waited for her to arrive. This had to be a sick prank, a cruel joke. Derek and I had our troubles, but he'd never betray me like this. Would he? Jenna burst through the front door, face etched with concern. What's going on? What's happened? Wordlessly, I handed her the note. She scanned it quickly, eyes widening. Who sent this? I don't know. It just arrived today. Jenna guided me to the couch. Breathe, hon. We'll figure this out. Anger flared suddenly. Figure what out? That my husband's screwing around behind my back with someone named Elise? Jenna squeezed my hand. You don't know anything yet. This could just be a fake letter trying to cause trouble. I sighed, my rage dissolving. You're right. I can't believe he'd do this to me. Not after everything. Not after the infidelity years ago. The counseling, his remorse, the promise we'd never go through that again. Jenna pursed her lips. I'll ask Alex to look into it, discreetly. If anything turns up, I swallowed hard. Did I even want to know? The next few weeks crawled by in agonizing slow motion. I scrutinized Derek's every move, looking for cracks in his routine. He seemed the same as always, if a bit distracted. More anonymous letters arrived, hinting at secrets. Elise's name echoed in my mind. Alex uncovered the first clues. Records of lavish gifts, a paper trail linking Derek and someone named E. Montgomery, but no concrete evidence of an affair, until the phone records. Late-night calls and texts to a number I didn't recognize, thousands of them over the past 6 months. No way it was for business. Rage simmered in my veins. How could he do this to us? After everything we'd survived? I confronted Derek one night after work, casting aside pretense. Who is she, Derek? He froze. What are you talking about? Don't play dumb. Who's Elise? Are you sleeping with her? Panic flitted across his face. No, of course not. There's no one else, I swear. I slammed the phone records down. Then explain this. Explain the gifts you sent her, the trips you took together. Explain the constant calls and texts behind my back. Derek paled. Marlene, please. My hands clenched. How long, Derek? How long have you been lying to me, betraying our vows, making a fool of me? Tears filled his eyes. I never meant. I love you, Marlene. Please let me fix this. I turned away, disgusted. Save it. I'm done with your lies. I had my proof now. My husband's betrayal laid bare. This was only the beginning. I would make him pay for every sleepless night, every moment he made me doubt myself, for breaking vows and my heart all over again. Derek would regret the day he ever heard the name Elise. How could he do this to me again? I fumed, pacing Jenna's living room. Jenna perched on the couch, lips pressed in a thin line. Derek's always been selfish. I warned you when you took him back the first time. I whirled to face her. I thought he'd changed. I thought our marriage meant something to him. Clearly it didn't. Alex's voice was grim. Once a cheater, always a cheater. Jenna shot him a look before turning back to me. What matters now is how you want to handle this. Derek betrayed your trust in the worst possible way. If you want to walk away... Oh, I'm not walking away, I cut in. I'm going to make him pay. Alex raised an eyebrow. What did you have in mind? I took a deep breath. I want to hit him where it hurts. I know things about Derek, secrets he's tried very hard to hide. Like the debt he'd racked up trying to climb the corporate ladder. All those business trips that were just excuses to gamble. I think it's time his pretty little mistress learned the truth about the man she's been spin-screwing. My voice dripped contempt. Once I expose who Derek really is, his affair with Elise will implode. Then I'll take him for everything he's worth. Jenna nodded slowly. All right, if you're sure this is what you want. I've never been more sure of anything. We ironed out a plan over the next few weeks, gathered every shred of evidence about the affair and Derek's lies. Elise thought she was sleeping with an ambitious executive. I couldn't wait to shatter that illusion. I bided my time, pretending I knew nothing, acted the dutiful wife while Derek carried on behind my back. Finally, the perfect opportunity arose, a family dinner at Derek's parents' country club. His parents had always thought I was beneath their precious son. Time to show them how wrong they were. I wore Derek's favorite black dress, wanting to look every inch the calm, confident wife. His parents greeted me with thin smiles and tight hugs. We sat down to dinner, the air simmering with tension. I made idle small talk, waiting for the right moment. Finally, when a lull hit midway through the main course, I struck. "Derek, don't you have some news for your parents?" I kept my tone light and sweet. Derek's fork froze halfway to his mouth. "What are you talking about?" I tilted my head. "Oh, I just thought you might want to tell them about the new baby on the way. They're going to be grandparents after all." His mother gasped. "A baby? But why wouldn't you tell us?" I turned to her with mocking sympathy. I'm sure Derek was just waiting for the right time, though it is a bit tricky since the mother is his mistress, Elise. Chaos erupted. Derek sputtered denials while his parents shouted recriminations. I sat back and watched it unfold with grim satisfaction. Finally, I slammed my hands on the table, silencing the room. I nudged Derek with contempt. "Go on, then. Tell them. Tell them what a lying, cheating failure you are." Derek shrank under my glare. When he stayed silent, I continued, relishing every word. "You want to know who your son really is? A liar, a fraud, up to his eyeballs in gambling debt. He used company money to finance trysts with his little whore." I slapped the proof down in front of his ashen parents. "So much for your perfect son, but I'm done covering for him. We're over, Derek. I quit." Let his house of cards collapse. I would be there to watch it crumble with a smile on my face. The fallout from the family dinner was swift and severe. Derek bombarded my phone with texts and voicemails, begging for another chance. His parents cut off contact completely, no doubt mortified by their son's disgrace. I ignored it all, refusing to let them guilt me into silence. They made their choices. Now they would face the consequences. The anonymous letters kept coming, hinting at secrets only Derek's mistress could know. I added them to the mounting pile of evidence. Soon, I would have enough to bury them both. I dove back into work, determined not to let Derek's betrayal affect my performance. The office rumor mill churned with speculation about my failing marriage and Derek's tawdry affair. I held my head high through it all. Let them talk. I had nothing to hide. Weeks later, Jenna called with an urgent discovery. "That mistress of Derek's? Her name's not Elise. It's Lisa. Lisa Montgomery." My breath caught. "Montgomery? As in Silas Montgomery?" Silas headed Montgomery Holdings, one of our biggest rivals. If Derek was sleeping with his daughter... "This goes deeper than we thought," Jenna said grimly. "Derek wasn't just cheating on you. He was using your marriage to get close to Montgomery Holdings through Lisa." Red-hot rage flooded me. My hands curled into fists. Bad enough Derek betrayed our vows again. He'd also jeopardized my career and reputation for his own gain. "That bastard," I seethed. "He doesn't just want to destroy our marriage, he wants to destroy me." "We're not going to let that happen." Jenna's voice hardened. "I've been digging into Montgomery Holdings. They're not as clean as they pretend to be." My pulse quickened. "What do you mean?" "Let's just say they have their fair share of skeletons. If this affair goes public, it could take down both Derek and Montgomery." I remembered Silas Montgomery's smug smile at the last trade conference, so assured of his dominance over my family's company. The thought of watching his empire crumble along with Derek's made my blood sing. "Do it," I told Jenna. "Full nuclear exposure. I want everyone to see their lies." I felt a perverse thrill making the plans, like pieces slotting into place. All those years bowing and scraping to get ahead, and for what? Men like Derek and Silas who used and abused anyone foolish enough to trust them. No more. I was done playing nice. The anonymous notes kept arriving, each more ominous than the last. Threats about what would happen if I didn't back down. Lisa clearly realized I wasn't going away quietly. I added the letters to the stack of evidence. Let Derek and his mistress threaten all they wanted. They couldn't intimidate me into silence. Not anymore. For the first time in years, I felt fully empowered. I walked taller, spoke up louder. Derek's betrayal had lit a fire in me, forged me into someone new, someone who wouldn't be pushed around or dismissed. Let them keep underestimating me. They had no idea what was coming. The day of reckoning had arrived. I woke up energized, ready to finally confront Derek and expose his lies. I dressed for battle, in a sharp black pantsuit and heels. Slicked on bold, red lipstick, armor against whatever vitriol Derek threw at me. I felt strong, unbreakable. At the office, I breezed through my morning meetings, anticipation thrumming under my cool exterior. I messaged Jenna and Alex. It's time. During lunch, I asked Derek to meet me in a private conference room. He arrived looking guarded, clearly expecting me to grovel. Not this time. I slid a file folder across the table. Do you know what this is? Derek eyed me warily as he opened it, then paled. Where did you get these? I smiled coldly. Records of all your little trips to the casino, the ones you claimed were for business, gambling away company money to fund your habit. I slapped down another folder. And let's not forget the mountain of debt you've accumulated. Tell me, does your mistress Lisa know about your financial issues? Or did you lie to her like you lied to me? Derek shoved back his chair. Enough. I won't sit here and listen to these outrageous accusations. My hand shot out, clutching his wrist. Oh no, you're going to sit here and listen to every word, unless you want these files leaked to the board. I held his gaze. Well? Sweat beaded his forehead. Slowly, he sat back down. I smiled, all ice. That's what I thought. I slid the divorce papers across the table. Derek stared at them, dumbstruck. Sign them. This marriage is over and you know it. When he still hesitated, I pressed harder. Come on, Derek. Sign the papers so you can run to Lisa with a clear conscience. She is pregnant, isn't she? His head jerked up, eyes wide with shock. I waved a hand. Oh, please. You didn't actually think I was ignorant about your affair this whole time, did you? I leaned forward. Now sign, or everyone we know will find out exactly what kind of man they married. Your choice. With shaking hands, Derek scrawled his signature on the paperwork. I gathered the file folders and stood abruptly. Our lawyers will be in touch about the divorce settlement. Don't even think of trying to screw me over, Derek. You know I can and will destroy you if you do. I walked steadily from the room, head high. The confrontation had gone even better than I planned. Now for the final blow. At dinner that evening, I sat waiting with Jenna and Alex. Derek's parents arrived first, both tense. When Derek joined us, I shared a knowing look with Jenna. Time to light the final fire. We made it through the salad course before I broke the silence. Well, Derek, don't you have an announcement for your parents? Derek paled. Before he could respond, I continued cheerfully. Derek's going to be a father. Isn't that lovely news? A hush fell over the table. Then came the explosion. Derek's parents shouted and raged as Derek sat, condemned. I watched it all with grim satisfaction, the inferno I'd stoked consuming them completely. Finally I stood, silencing the room. I faced my in-laws, triumph surging through me. You're welcome to the cheating mess of a son you raised. Consider this my official resignation from this family. I'm done covering for him. I strode out without looking back, Derek's shouts echoing behind me. I'd laid waste to everything he valued. Now to focus on building myself back up from the ashes. The fallout from my confrontation with Derek was immediate. He blew up my phone, leaving pleading voicemails and apologetic texts. His parents called too, demanding I reconsider. I ignored them all. The time for mercy was over. Jenna came over to debrief. That was an epic takedown. How are you holding up? I sighed. Relieved it's finally out in the open, but I want to make sure he doesn't get away with this. She nodded. What do you need from me? I want to go after Derek financially in the divorce, bleed him dry, and I want to destroy his reputation. Jenna raised an eyebrow. Playing hardball, I like it. I can start drafting aggressive terms for the settlement. Good, he doesn't get to walk away from this unscathed. My phone buzzed with yet another pleading message from Derek. Delete. What about his mistress Lisa? Jenna asked. Any plans there? I smiled slowly. Oh yes. She wanted Derek so badly, she can have what's left of him. I'd spent years buried under Derek's lies. Never again. From now on, people would know exactly who they were dealing with. While Jenna handled the legal side, Alex and I planned Derek's social downfall. A few anonymous tips later, and the story of his tawdry affair and excessive gambling spread like wildfire through the office gossip channels. Derek was promptly placed on leave, pending an ethics investigation. I saved the damning evidence to leak publicly, if needed. With Derek's reputation in tatters, I asked Alex to dig deeper on Lisa. There had to be more ammunition we could use against her. Sure enough, he uncovered her damaging history as a homewrecker. Other affairs, broken engagements, manipulated men. She was a predator, and Derek her latest prey. Armed with the information, I reached out to her directly for the first time. Lisa, we need to talk, woman to woman. She agreed to meet for coffee. As we sat staring at each other over lattes, I felt only cold contempt for the woman sitting across from me. Calculating, manipulative, cruel. She and Derek deserved each other. I slid a file over to her. I assume you know who I am. Lisa glanced through the photos and records inside, then paled. Where did you get these? That's not important. What is important is that you stay away from my husband. She stiffened. Ex-husband. And I'll do as I please. I leaned forward. I know women like you, Lisa. You target married men to satisfy some twisted need for power. I'm sure Derek spun quite the tale to get in your bed. I tapped the file. But lies don't hold up forever. The truth has a way of coming out. I held her gaze. Leave Derek. Focus on that baby, if it's even his, because if you don't, everyone you've ever crossed paths with will learn exactly what kind of person you are. I guarantee it. I left a shaken Lisa behind. Let her worry Derek would learn the truth, too. I wanted her constantly looking over her shoulder, like I'd had to do. Jenna was right. Playing hardball felt good. Taking back my power, exposing the ugliness Derek tried to hide, felt damn near euphoric. No more being the dutiful, forgiving wife. That woman died the day I learned Derek betrayed me again. Now someone new had risen from her ashes, someone who would never be used or dismissed again. I had been reborn, and it was time for my new life to begin. After exposing Derek's lies, I finally felt free. No more constantly looking over my shoulder, wondering when the next betrayal would come. It was liberating. The divorce proceedings advanced swiftly with the mountain of evidence against Derek. My lawyer assured me I'd get everything I asked for in the settlement. Derek didn't stand a chance. His mom still called frequently, pleading with me to give her son another chance. I blocked her number. They'd all shown their true colors. Now, they could live with the consequences. A few weeks later, Jenna called me grimly. We have a problem. Lisa's still in the picture. Derek convinced her the baby is his. I pinched the bridge of my nose. Of course he did. Derek could charm his way out of anything when backed into a corner. She's pressuring him to get shared custody in the divorce, Jenna continued. Playing happy new family. An icy rage filled me. So they thought they could try and play me, even now? Like hell. Set up a family dinner. Here, I want them all under one roof. Time for the final reckoning with Derek, Lisa, and his toxic parents. No more manipulating shadows, everything out in the open. On the night, I dressed in black armor again, bold red lipstick my war paint. Jenna and Alex arrived first, grimly determined. Right on time, Derek walked in with his parents flanking him on either side. Lisa trailed behind, wearing a dress stretched tight over her swollen belly. I greeted them with a shark-like smile. So nice to have the whole family together again. We sat, tension simmering. I kept the conversation light, biding my time, waiting until the main course was served before dropping my first verbal bomb. Lisa, you're positively glowing. When are you due? She blinked, hand going instinctively to her belly. Early next month. How exciting. Derek must be thrilled to welcome his first child. Across the table, Derek paled. Lisa shifted in her seat. Yes, well, we're both very happy. I'm sure, I smiled pleasantly. Though didn't you tell me you two only started seeing each other last fall? What an accelerated timeline. The table went silent. Lisa's eyes widened fractionally. Gotcha. Derek's mom recovered first. That's enough now, Marlene. Stop these ugly accusations. I ignored her, focusing on Lisa. Sweetie, surely you're aware Derek was still very much with me when you supposedly got pregnant? I hope he at least told you the truth about our relationship timeline. You lying bitch, Derek spat. Don't pretend our marriage was some happy fantasy. You checked out years ago. I shook my head. And whose fault was that, Derek? Or have you forgotten your chronic habit of screwing anything that walks? Chaos erupted. Lisa accused Derek of deceit. He shouted desperately, appealing to his parents for backup. They in turn screamed at me for causing a scene. Finally, I slammed my hand down, fed up. Enough, I'm done with the lies. I locked eyes with Lisa. That baby is not his. Stunned silence. Lisa's hand clutched her belly. How dare you? I tossed the paternity test results down with a thwop, watching the color drain from Derek's face. No more hiding. Lisa dissolved into tears. Derek vehemently denied it, but I could see the truth dawning in his eyes. They'd tried to play me, and lost. Badly. Checkmate. I stood up calmly and addressed Lisa. You want Derek? You can keep him, but this ends tonight. We're done. I turned and strode away, finally free. Let Derek and Lisa turn on each other. My hands were clean. The family dinner felt like a tipping point. After exposing Lisa's lies, it was all finally crumbling for her and Derek. Lisa disappeared from the social scene, no doubt embarrassed by the entire affair. Derek bombarded me with angry texts, but I stood firm. We were over. Professionally, things shifted in my favor, too. With Derek disgraced, upper management started relying on me more. I stepped up, determined to prove myself. A few weeks later, Jenna called me excitedly. "You're never going to believe who just reached out to me." "Who?" "Liam Montgomery, Lisa's ex-husband." I sat up straighter. This was an interesting development. What did he want? "To talk to you. Apparently you two have a common enemy." I considered this. Liam had divorced Lisa years earlier under mysterious circumstances. If anyone knew secrets I could use against her, it was him. Set up a meeting, but discreetly. If word got back to Derek or Lisa... Jenna agreed. "I'll handle it. This could be the ammunition we need to finally shut them down for good." We met Liam at a small cafe downtown. I studied the handsome, well-dressed man as he approached. He had a wounded air about him, despite the tailored suit and easy smile. "Marlene, thank you for meeting me." We exchanged pleasantries before I cut to the chase. "What do you want with me, Liam?" His face darkened. "Straight to business. I appreciate that. We have a common enemy in your husband and my ex-wife." I raised an eyebrow. "Go on." "I have information that could ruin them both socially and professionally, but I'll only share if we work together." I considered his offer. Liam had resources and insider access at his family's company. Combined with my evidence against Derek, we could inflict real damage. I extended my hand. "You have a deal." Liam broke into a sharp grin. "Excellent." We hashed out a plan to strategically leak information about Derek's unethical behavior and Lisa's sordid history. A coordinated takedown. Within days, the gossip rags were buzzing with sordid rumors about Derek's gambling and Lisa's affairs. The business journals questioned shady dealings at Montgomery Holdings. Their reputations were being shredded. But I wasn't done yet. Liam came through with one final bombshell. Evidence linking Lisa and Derek to corporate espionage against my family's company. Enough proof for authorities to get involved. I called an emergency meeting with the executives and board members, Liam by my side. As we presented the damaging documents, outrage erupted around the room. Derek's treachery went deeper than any of us realized. He'd abused his position to undercut the very company that had given him a career. The board immediately voted to fire Derek and pursue criminal charges. Justice was finally being served. As we left the meeting, Liam turned to me. "I know this was about revenge for you, but I wanted to say thank you. Exposing Lisa and Derek, it brought me closure too." I saw the sincerity in his eyes. Liam hadn't just been motivated by payback. He needed to regain control after Lisa destroyed his life too. I understood completely. "Of course. And thank you for having the courage to come forward. I'm just sorry you got caught in Lisa's web, too." Liam nodded, looking thoughtful. "You know, now that it's all over, maybe we could get dinner sometime." I considered him handsome, successful, principled. A man I knew I could trust. "I'd like that," I replied, and I meant it. With Derek ruined professionally and Lisa in hiding, I decided to make my final move, seizing control of the company from Derek's family. As acting head of the business, I reviewed operations with a critical eye, building an airtight case for mismanagement under my father-in-law's leadership. With Liam's help, I also uncovered financial irregularities suggesting embezzlement. The old guard had been bleeding the company dry for years. No more. I called an emergency shareholders meeting and presented the damning evidence. When I proposed a vote of no confidence in the current leadership, the motion passed swiftly. The board named me as interim CEO. After the meeting, I stopped by my father-in-law's office. He sat grimly packing his possessions into a box. "I hope you're satisfied, taking everything from our family." His voice shook with bitterness. I tilted my head. "Satisfied? No, I won't be satisfied until your toxic son is permanently out of my life." My father-in-law slammed his fists on the desk. "Damn you, Marlene. Derek loved you." I laughed coldly. "Loved me? Is that what you call his chronic affairs and betrayals?" I leaned in close, punctuating each word. "He never loved me." With that, I walked out, leaving the old man fuming impotently. One chapter closed. With the company secure, I turned my attention to finalizing the divorce. My lawyer was ruthlessly efficient, securing me the house, investments, and a generous settlement in return for keeping Derek's misdeeds quiet. The day the papers were signed, I invited Jenna over to celebrate. I raised a glass. Here's to new beginnings. She clinked her glass against mine. To new beginnings, and Marlene 2.0, who takes no shot from anyone. I laughed, feeling lighter than I had in years. Derek was finally out of my life for good. Marlene 2.0, I like the sound of that. A few weeks later, Liam took me out to dinner at an upscale restaurant downtown. Over wine and candlelight, our talk turned serious. I have to confess, I had an ulterior motive asking you here tonight, Liam said. I want to make this, us, official. He took my hands in his. You are an extraordinary woman, Marlene. I know we started off with revenge in common, but what I feel goes so much deeper now. I looked into his earnest eyes and saw genuine emotion there, a real second chance. I feel the same way, I confessed. I tried to deny it at first, but you've shown me I can love and trust again. I want that future with you. Liam broke into a smile. Then let's build it together. The next day, he accompanied me to Derek's mother's palatial estate. I handed her a copy of the divorce decree. It's done. Your son is dead to me now in every way. I trust there will be no further contact from any of you. My former mother-in-law glared. You'll regret this, Marlene. I glanced at Liam and squeezed his hand. No, I don't think I will, but Derek will, for the rest of his life. We walked out together into the sunshine, leaving the toxic past behind. I had everything I needed right beside me. The story of my marriage's ugly implosion made headlines for a while, but I held my head high through the gossip and whispers. I had nothing to hide anymore. In time, new scandals seized the public's attention. My reputation recovered, stronger than ever. With Liam as my partner, I transformed the company into a thriving modern business, and I took my rightful place as CEO on my own terms. My past self was gone, a distant memory. Now a powerful, unstoppable woman had risen in her place. Unbreakable, unstoppable, unleashed at last. This was my time now. The moving van sat idled by the curb, its rear door gaping open like a hungry maw. I stared in disbelief as the last remnants of my life were carted out of the house I had called home for 30 years. What is going on here? I demanded, hands trembling as I gripped the strap of my purse. Elliot turned towards me, his expression one of feigned surprise. The smug grin tugging at the corners of his mouth said it all. He knew exactly what he was doing. Harper, you're back early, he said coolly, stuffing his hands into the pockets of his chinos. I bristled at his casual tone. Don't Harper me. What have you done? Before he could respond, a lilting voice cut through the tension. There you are, Elliot, darling. A statuesque blonde in a ridiculously short sundress slinked up beside him, looping her arm through his. My stomach twisted into a knot as her identity became clear. Marla, Elliot's mistress from the office, the one he had sworn was ancient history. I should have known better than to trust his lies. You sold our home? I choked out the words, praying this was some cruel joke. After everything we've been through together? Elliot opened his mouth, but I barreled on, anger and hurt swelling within me. The sacrifices I made when your business failed, caring for your awful mother when she fell ill, pouring my life into this house, into our marriage. I was nearly shouting now, hot tears streaking my cheeks. Marla wrapped her arms around Elliot in a sickening display of possession. Don't get hysterical, Harper. It's just business. Just business. After 30 years of partnership, of struggling and persevering side by side, he was tossing me aside like a used rag. For her. I rounded on Elliot, squaring my shoulders. You lying, cheating snake, you're willing to destroy everything we built together for this? Elliot avoided my gaze, the muscles in his jaw twitching. He knew he had been caught red-handed in his web of deceit. The seconds ticked by in silence, the only sound the sudden clatter as the movers heaved the last of our belongings into the van. It was really happening. The man I had loved and trusted above all else had betrayed me in the cruelest way imaginable. Marla sneered at me over Elliot's shoulder. Time to move on, Harper. This is our new beginning. Their smugness was more than I could bear. Squaring my shoulders, I jutted my chin defiantly at the pair. You want a new beginning? Fine, but mark my words, this isn't over. Turning on my heel, I stalked away from the home I had poured my heart and soul into, leaving the shattered remains of my marriage behind. The game was on. Elliot and his mistress had started a war, and I would be damned if I went down without a fight. I barely slept that night, that the image of Elliot smugly carrying on with his mistress scorched into my mind. How could the man I had loved, the father of my children, be so callous and cruel? My anger simmered as I paced the guest room of Alex's apartment, the temporary living situation doing nothing to soften the sting of Elliot's betrayal. I had given that man everything, my unwavering support through hard times, my love and loyalty for 3 decades. And this was how he repaid me? The shrill ring of my cell phone sliced through the tense silence. Jenna's name flashed across the screen. Mom? Her voice wobbled with unshed tears. Is it true what Alex told me? Dad left you for some young thing? My chest tightened. Having to explain this nightmare to my children was almost worse than living through it myself. They had always looked up to their father, despite his litany of shortcomings over the years. I'm so sorry, honey. Your father and I, we're getting divorced. I cringed at how matter-of-fact the words sounded, like I was reporting groceries rather than the imminent dissolution of my marriage. Angry silence crackled down the line. When Jenna spoke again, her tone was low and uncompromising. That selfish bastard, after everything you sacrificed for him and this family? She broke off in a choked sob. Mom, I'm coming over. We're going to get through this together. Thank you, sweetie, I murmured, feeling a surge of pride at my daughter's fierce loyalty. At least I could count on my children, despite their father's despicable actions. A few hours later, Jenna burst into the apartment, red-faced and bristling. Alex sat slouched on the sofa, his expression one of carefully restrained rage. That low-life piece of scum, Jenna spat, flinging herself into the armchair beside me, throwing away 30 years of marriage for a cheap fling? Unfreaking believable. Jenna, Alex warned in a low voice. No, Alex, I won't stay quiet. He humiliated Mom in the worst way. She wheeled towards me, eyes blazing. Please tell me you're taking him for every last penny. I studied my daughter's fierce protectiveness and loyalty, my heart swelling despite the misery of my circumstances. This was the family I cared about, the ones who had my back no matter what. Squaring my shoulders, I returned Jenna's determined stare. You're damn right I am. If that rat bastard Elliot thinks he can just discard me and our marriage, he has another thing coming. My gaze slid towards Alex, who gave a somber nod of agreement. A muscle twitched in his clenched jaw. We're with you every step of the way, Mom. Just let us know whatever you need. In that moment, I felt a surge of resolve. Elliot and his mistress had detonated a bomb that shattered my life into pieces, but if he thought I would go down without a fight, he was gravely mistaken. It was time to show my soon-to-be ex-husband exactly why hell hath no fury like a woman scorned. Squaring my shoulders, I looked my children in the eyes. Here's what we're going to do. The divorce proceedings were uglier than I could have imagined. Elliot fought me tooth and nail, contesting everything from asset division to alimony. His smug arrogance in the courtroom made my blood boil. Your Honor, my client has devoted her entire adult life to supporting Mr. Monroe's endeavors, often at great personal cost, my lawyer argued, throwing a pointed look at Elliot. She put her career on hold to raise their children, manage the household, and provide emotional support through failed business ventures. She is more than entitled to an equitable share of the marital assets. Elliot's eyes narrowed into serpentine slits. That condescending sneer I knew all too well twisted his lips. He seemed to forget I sat just a few feet away, watching his every arrogant micro-expression. With all due respect, his lawyer oozed, Mr. Monroe's recent financial windfall stems from the prudent sale of the marital home he purchased prior to the marriage. My client's new business partner, he threw a deferential nod at that blonde bimbo Marla, simply provided the funds to unlock the asset's latent value. Mrs. Monroe's demands are exorbitant given her minimal contributions. You lying sack of scum, I mentally hurled at my soon-to-be ex-husband. I burned with impotent rage, wanting nothing more than to hurl the nearest heavy object at his insufferably smug face. The arrogance. To dismiss 3 decades of selfless partnership, putting his wants ahead of my own dreams, raising our children almost single-handedly, and dragging his worthless carcass back from the brink of financial ruin as minimal contributions. White-hot fury lanced through me. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw Alex leaning forward, his hands knotted into white-knuckled fists atop his knees. Jenna put a calming hand on his arm, her own eyes glinting with outrage. "Mom's the one who kept this family afloat while you were off chasing yet another get-rich-quick scheme," Alex hissed under his breath, low enough for just me to hear. "Don't you dare try to rewrite history in that condescending way." I squeezed his hand in gratitude, stoking the fires of my own resolve. We had fought too hard, sacrificed too much of our lives, to let Elliot sweep it all under the rug now. If he thought I would go down without a fight, he had underestimated the wrong woman. The following days and weeks were consumed by a whirlwind of paperwork and legal appointments. With Alex and Jenna's assistance, I pored over financial statements, compiled records, and documented everything. No stone was left unturned. Gone were the days of meekly accepting Elliot's decisions, of surrendering pieces of myself for his desires and ego. I would expose every lie, every despicable act for the world to see. Elliot Monroe was about to learn a brutal lesson. You didn't get to spend 30 years leeching off a spouse's sacrifices and loyalty, discarding them like a used rag for your own selfish gratification, without suffering immense consequences. Not on my watch. It was a new day. Armed with evidence and sheer determination, I was finally taking control of my destiny. Elliot's reckoning was coming, and nothing would stand in my way. The Westbrook Charity Gala was usually the highlight of my social calendar, a chance to dress up, rub elbows with the town's elite, and raise money for good causes. This year, my motivations were decidedly different. From the moment I arrived, eyes followed me like hawks, whispers rippling through the crowd. Word of Elliot's scandalous betrayal had spread like wildfire thanks to the divorce proceedings. My cheeks burned, but I lifted my chin defiantly, gliding across the marble floor with practiced grace. Out of the corner of my eye, I spotted them. Elliot looking disarmingly handsome in his tuxedo, with that blonde bimbo Marla draped over his arm like a damned trophy. She stuck out like a sore thumb in that garish red dress that clung inappropriately to every curve. My fists clenched involuntarily at my sides. How dare they show their faces here after demolishing everything we'd built? The sheer arrogance of it made my blood boil. Elliot caught my withering stare and quickly averted his eyes, suddenly finding the crystal chandelier overhead fascinating. Good, let the craven weasel squirm under my gaze for once. Marla, however, sneered back at me, her scarlet lips curving into a mocking smile as she ran her ringed fingers along Elliot's arm in a possessive display. My jaw clenched hard enough to crack teeth. The MC's voice abruptly boomed from the speakers, beckoning everyone to their seats for the program's commencement. I took a fortifying breath, smoothing my hands over my evening gown. It was now or never. Abandoning my usual table, I weaved through the clusters of impeccably dressed guests until I stood front and center on the stage, microphone in hand. "Good evening, everyone," I began in a tone of forced civility. "As you all may know, I'm going through a difficult transition in my personal life currently." Elliot went rigid in his seat, realization dawning across his features. Marla's eyes narrowed to serpentine slits, her over-glossed lips parting in outrage. My voice carried flawlessly to every corner of the vaulted ballroom. My husband of 30 years has chosen to abandoning our marriage vows, our family, and everything we built together in pursuit of. I threw Marla a pointed look, more self-indulgent desires. A shocked murmur rippled through the crowd like a Mexican wave. Elliot's ruddy face colored even further under the spotlight's glare. While I'm sure he and his new associate are quite proud of their clandestine dalliances, I wouldn't feel right letting such a prominent member of our community get away with such appalling deceptions. Marla shot to her feet, perfectly plucked eyebrows slanted furiously over her pale blue eyes. "How dare you drag us through the mud this way?" she shouted, planting her hands on her canted hips. "This is low, even for you." A vindicated smirk tugged at my lips. "Low?" I echoed over the crowd's stunned gasps. "Low is cheating on your wife of 3 decades and abandoning your family for a cheap fling. Low is lying, gaslighting, and manipulating those closest to you for your own selfish appetites." I leveled my gaze at Marla and the pinched, crimson-faced Elliot behind her. No, revealing the unvarnished truth about your contemptible actions. That is justice. Maybe next time you'll both think twice before carelessly destroying human lives in pursuit of your transient desires. Turning on my heel, I surrendered the stage to thunderous applause and whistles, watching in satisfaction as Elliot buried his flaming face in his hands. The gloves were off. In front of the entire town, I had drawn the battle lines. Let the war begin. The gavel struck the wooden sound block with a decisive thump, echoing through the courtroom. My hands trembled as Judge Reynolds cleared his throat, shuffling through the stack of documents on his bench. In the matter of the divorce proceedings between Harper Monroe and Elliot Monroe, his voice carried the weight of finality. Elliot sat ramrod straight beside his lawyer, his expression unreadable. I forced myself to meet his gaze, letting none of the turbulent mix of anger, grief, and vindication roiling inside me show. After months of vicious legal battles, falsified financial records, and levels of deception I'd never imagined possible from the man I once loved, it all came down to this moment. My grip tightened around the armrests until my knuckles shone bone white. Having reviewed all evidence and testimony, I thereby order Mr. Monroe to pay Mrs. Monroe a lump sum of $4 million. The judge's ruling sliced through the thick tension like a hot knife. In addition, Mrs. Monroe shall receive 60% of the liquid assets and investment portfolios accumulated during the marriage. A guttural sound of disbelief escaped Elliot's lips. His rictus mask of composure finally shattered, giving way to flushed, impotent rage. "Suck on that, you arrogant prick," I mentally hurled at him. Furthermore, Judge Reynolds spoke over Elliot's sputtering, Mrs. Monroe is awarded full ownership of the Monroe residence on Summit Hill Road, free and clear of all liens or encumbrances. My heart stuttered in my chest as the enormity hit me. He was giving me back the home Elliot had so gleefully sold out from under me. Our home, the place we had raised our children and built a life together for 30 years, would remain mine. Tears of sheer relief and vindication pricked my eyes. Alex squeezed my hand tightly beside me, a proud smile crinkling the corners of his eyes. "That lying snake got exactly what he deserved," he murmured under his breath. Jenna leaned across him and enveloped me in a fierce hug, openly weeping tears of joy. Beyond them, Elliot sat utterly motionless, his face drained of all color. The full weight of his actions had finally caught up with him. As I strode triumphantly from the courtroom to raucous cheers and applause from my friends and supporters, I was vividly reminded of the scorpion and frog fable. Elliot had thoughtlessly stung me, his faithful partner who carried him across the tumultuous waters of life, and now he would drown in the consequences of his treachery. But I intended to do more than simply survive his betrayal. With this ruling, I had been afforded a new lease on life, a chance to heal, to rebuild, and to pursue all the hopes and dreams I had put on hold for that ungrateful bastard. And I would be damned if I didn't take this second chance and run with it full throttle. 6 weeks later, I stood in the marble foyer of my reacquired home, drinking in the warm, familiar surroundings as the moving crew unloaded my belongings. The mover grunts and thuds providing a stark counterpoint to the eerie silence and memories that hung thick in the air. This place had been the backdrop to my once happy marriage, the birthplace of cherished family memories, unbreakable bonds between husband and wife, and dreams of growing old together. Elliot's lies and callous greed had very nearly ripped it all away. But not anymore. Tilting my chin up, I surveyed the cavernous front room, envisioning the fresh start taking shape before me. This house, this life, belonged solely to me and my children now. The shackles of deception and manipulation were finally severed. It was time to reclaim my dignity, my identity, and take that first defiant step into my bold new chapter. Just when I thought I was finally free of Elliot's treachery, the other shoe dropped with a sickening thud. "You're doing what?" I sputtered, gaping at Jenna over the breakfast bar. She slid a sleek brochure across the granite countertop toward me with a grim look. "Dad and Marla are opening up some sort of luxury bed and breakfast." My stomach twisted into a queasy knot as I scanned the high-gloss photos advertising their premier inn and chateau in a pristine mountain setting. I could only imagine how much of my divorce settlement went into funding this mockery. That arrogant son of a bitch, I hissed under my breath. The place opens in 3 months, Jenna continued, fire blazing behind her eyes. Using the cash he swindled from selling our home, no less. Bitter bile burned the back of my throat. Of course that weasel Elliot wouldn't be content until he'd twisted the knife one last time, flaunting his ill-gotten trophy acquisition in a lavish new business venture. It was the ultimate insult. In that fateful moment, something inside me hardened like carbon under immense pressure. Elliot had made his move, ramming home just how little our marriage and my sacrifices had ever meant. The gloves were officially off. "You know what?" I said, looking up at Jenna with a steely determination. "Two can play at this game." Over the next couple weeks, I quietly put my business skills to work. Between the millions from my divorce settlement, unbridled passion, and an unquenchable drive to crush Elliot once and for all, those old familiar thrills of strategizing and building something from the ground up reignited hot in my veins. Before long, the pieces fell into place with impeccable precision. The perfect location secured, permits and licenses filed, and employees hired. Elliot's smug comeuppance had become my singular obsession. Of course, I kept the entire operation strictly under wraps, waiting for the perfect opportunity to skin the cat. That chance arose when Alex called me with a frantic update. "Mom, you'll never guess what. They invited us to some big launch party for their stupid inn." Elliot and his mistress, foolishly dangling their bait. I could taste the sweet promise of revenge on my tongue. Did they now? I purred into the phone. My son's confusion was palpable. 2 weeks later, Elliot and I stood amidst the opulent trappings of his Monroe Inn and Resort launch gala. With a bored flick of the champagne flute, I signaled Alex to join us by the towering picture windows. Elliot's serpentine gaze immediately narrowed with displeasure, so predictable. "I must congratulate you both on this quaint establishment," I began. My tone dripped with sugary condescension. Marla bristled, straightening the tight bodice of her obscene cocktail dress. "Why, Harper, how big of you to join our celebration." Elliot merely stared at me, dumbfounded. "Although, I can't help feeling it's missing. Something." I paused dramatically, watching fresh color bloom across his cheeks. "Some competition, if you will, to keep you on your toes." "Competition?" His voice finally barked out a brusque response. "What the devil are you talking about?" With a serene smile, I looped my arm through Alex's elbow. "Why don't I show you both instead?" We swept through the ballroom, Elliot and his trampy mistress gawking like hooked fish at our heels. A bank of French doors waited at the opposite end, where the remainder of my crew hovered in anticipation. "Elliot, Marla, welcome to the grand opening of the Chateau Sophia." At my signal, the doors swung wide, revealing the sprawling vista of the property I had meticulously assembled to be bigger, bolder, and infinitely more upscale than their paltry imitation. Their jaws dropped in horror at the sight. "You didn't really think I was going to let you prance around with my life's work unchallenged, did you?" My eyes glittered with malicious glee. As my new employees swarmed the terrace behind me, a messenger arrived with urgent news for Elliot. His backers were pulling funding over the 11th hour competition. The arrogant blowhard gaped at me, the color rapidly draining from his blustered features. I offered a mocking toast of my champagne glass. "To new beginnings, darling. Welcome to the hospitality wars." The opening months of the Chateau Sophia could hardly have gone better. Our elegant, rustic chic accommodations and curated experiences were an immediate hit, drawing rave reviews and becoming the area's hottest destination. In stark contrast, Elliot's half-baked Monroe Inn and Resort limped along in obscurity. Their online listings were littered with scathing critiques, shabby decor, subpar amenities, and painfully amateurish service chief among the complaints. Seeing that arrogant blowhard receive his long-overdue comeuppance was more satisfying than I could have possibly imagined. Each scathing review, every vacant room, and negative press mention further cemented his colossal failures as both a businessman and human being. Every few weeks, I would gather my team for an all-hands meeting to align our strategy. More than once, Elliot's petty attempts at sabotaging my operations through underhanded tactics were uncovered and swiftly neutralized. The bastard tried bribing the Campbell family to leave us a scathing review. Renee, my operations lead, told me one afternoon. A contemptuous sneer twisted her lips, as if a wealthy clan like that would ever sully their reputation for a few measly bucks. I waved a dismissive hand, hiding my vindicated smirk behind a sip of coffee. That's just how low Elliot will stoop. He's flailing desperately to stay afloat, but it won't be enough. Sure enough, it was barely 2 months into our heated battle for hospitality supremacy that the unraveling began. Rumor had it, Elliot was hemorrhaging cash at an unsustainable clip, having wildly underestimated startup costs and failing to gain a foothold in the market. When the foreclosure notices started appearing in the local paper's legal announcements, I couldn't resist a wry smile of triumph. Textbook overconfident arrogance, bulldozing ahead without doing his due diligence. It was so quintessentially Elliot. Later that week, Alex forwarded me a scathing article about the pending closure of the Monroe Inn. Turns out Elliot had stopped paying vendors, staff, and underlying creditors in a desperate bid to keep the facade going. His investors, those few who hadn't already pulled their funding, were going to get hosed. The comments section was a virtual bonfire of schadenfreude, with locals and former patrons alike torching Elliot for his litany of failures. Just desserts for such a prolific liar and cheat. Not long after, I found myself across the polished alderwood desk from the one and only Elliot Monroe. He was noticeably haggard, the last bastions of his smarmy confidence crumbling under the crushing weight of his debacle. "I'm destitute, Harper," he admitted in a hoarse tone, unable to meet my unblinking stare. "The business, the investors, it's all gone belly up. I have nothing." The disgraced charlatan finally confessing the depths of his depravity should have felt enormously vindicating. Instead, I just felt hollow, numb to the man whose betrayal had nearly decimated my soul. "After everything you did to me, to us," I murmured, gesturing between us, "did you really think I was just going to roll over and let you win?" His jaw clenched, tendons straining beneath his ruddy skin. I leaned forward, holding his gaze with steely determination. "Wake up and face reality, Elliot. You're an arrogant, insecure little man whose own reprehensible actions orchestrated this downfall. All I did was give you the chance to reap what you've sown." My office abruptly felt too small, the air heavy with decades of simmering resentments. This confrontation had been a long time coming. "Please." The broken whisper escaped Elliot's lips. I waited for the rest, but he seemed to shrink further in on himself, deflating like an untied balloon. In that moment, I realized just how profoundly over him I was. The man had gambled away my love, my loyalty, our life, for his own selfish cravings. He deserved no more of my energy or power. Rising to my feet, I smoothed my hands over my skirt and crossed to the door. "I'm afraid there's nothing left to say. Don't let the door hit you on the way out." As Elliot slunk from the office in disgrace, I felt an unfurling sense of finality. Whatever puppet strings had still bound me were severed. My karma delivered. His miserable fate sealed. It was a new beginning in the truest sense. And I had miles more to go before reaching my final form. The warm summer breeze carried the fragrance of freshly bloomed roses and honeysuckle as I stood on the terrace, surveying my personal oasis. After more than a year of stratospheric success with the Chateau Sophia, I had seized the opportunity to expand into a full-service luxury resort and spa. My staff bustled about in crisp uniforms, meticulously prepping for the grand opening gala. Lanterns were strung between marble columns, and sleek white cabanas dotted the immaculate grounds. I inhaled deeply, savoring the sweet air and sense of peaceful accomplishment. This night marked the culmination of a years-long journey, one driven by sheer determination to not just survive betrayal, but to thrive in defiance of it. "It's really something, huh, Mom?" Alex's voice shook me from my reverie. I turned to find him beaming with pride, Jenna looped through his arm in a chic sundress. Despite the years and tumult we'd endured, my children still stood staunchly by my side. "You've built an amazing legacy, one we're all so proud of," Jenna gushed. Emotions swelled in my throat as I pulled them both into a fierce embrace. Just a couple years ago, our family had been in tatters, each of us suffering the devastating blows of Elliot's callous betrayal. We never could have imagined coming out on the other side like this. "I couldn't have done any of this without you two," I said gruffly, blinking back happy tears. "Your love and support gave me the strength to keep going. no matter what. We stood together in comfortable silence, cherishing the profoundly transformed trajectory of our lives. The agonizing days of despair and hurt were finally behind us. A gentle rap on the terrace doors signaled an arrival. I turned to find Justin, the new director of hospitality operations, hovering with an uncertain look. "Apologies for interrupting, Mrs. Monroe, but he's here, asking for you." My stomach clenched instinctively. I already knew who the he in question was. Taking a steadying breath, I nodded for Justin to send him out. No more than a minute later, the terrace doors parted, revealing a shrunken, haggard figure that had once been Elliot Monroe. His expensive suit hung loosely on his diminished frame, his eyes downcast and swallowed by deep hollows. To put it plainly, he looked utterly, irrevocably broken. "Elliot," I greeted with cool detachment, nodding to Jenna and Alex. To their credit, they restrained themselves from any outbursts, simply watching on in stone-faced silence. "Harper, he began, words failing him as his mouth worked soundlessly. With visible effort, he met my gaze, shame and regret etched into the weathered lines of his face. "I just wanted to see the spectacular woman you've become with my own eyes. The strength, the success. You've cemented an enduring legacy while I squandered my own." His laugh was a dejected, hollow rasp. "I gambled away the love of my life, my family, in pursuit of cheap vices and ego strokes. A bigger fool has never walked this earth." My first instinct was to rebuff his pathetic wallowing, to dismiss him as easily as swatting a fly, but some deeper pang of crushed hopes gave me pause. Maybe in another life, another reality where he made different choices, things could have turned out so differently for us. But that path was forever closed to him now, his misery entirely self-wrought. "You're right about one thing," I said after a loaded pause. "This life, this empire, is mine now. One I built from the ashes of the world you burnt to the ground." Elliot staggered back slightly, absorbing the weight of my condemnation. "But I won't have you polluting it with your boorishness any longer," I continued, mustering every fiber of dignity. "Tonight, I'm surrounded by the people who matter most, my loyal family, my driven team, my esteemed guests. You've been excised from this existence entirely." I pierced him with a final, unwavering stare. "Now, get off my property before I have security remove you." Without another word, the shell of the man who had once been my husband turned and shambled away in disgrace. A profound sense of closure blossomed within me as I watched him disappear into the gloaming. At long last, I had severed the final tether binding me to my anguished past. Ahead lay an open field of possibility, and a hard-won second chance to cultivate the life I deserved. A new chapter was finally beginning.
It really was the right decision to divorce you. You and your son are still as pathetic as ever. I make $200,000 a year, you know. It seems that my ex-husband just wanted to boast about himself. As proof, he didn't even try to ask about our current situation. Ah, right. I should introduce you to my current wife. This is Julia. He introduced his new spouse to me. What was he thinking? Ah, is that all? Are we done here? Bye then. Wait a minute. As I tried to leave, my ex-husband blocked my way again. Hey. Are you jealous because we look happy? Don't let your poverty twist your heart too. You'll only become more miserable. My ex-husband assumed I was unhappy. I was so angry that I felt sick. As I remained silent, he was about to say something more, but Steve interrupted him. "Mom, why don't you fire this old man?" "What?" "My name is Kim. I am now 42 years old. I married Michael, a colleague from the same company, when I was 26. I continued to work after our marriage, but I quit my job when I got pregnant. Afterward, our son Steve was born. Once he turned 7 and started elementary school, child-rearing became a bit easier. Thinking it might be good to start working outside again, I discussed it with my husband. It seemed he had been waiting for this, as he agreed immediately. He probably thought it would help with our finances. But he began rushing me while I was job hunting. Did you find a job yet? No. Are you even looking properly? Any job will do, right? He seemed really eager for me to work. Moreover, while I was looking for a part-time job, he suggested, "If you're going to work, isn't it better to work full-time? Even if not every day, how about 3 days a week for 8 hours each? Working too long would take me out of your dependent coverage, you know? Just because Steve is in elementary school doesn't mean he doesn't need any attention. I get home early, after all." However, Michael suggested that since I could put Steve in after-school care, working full-time 5 days a week would be better if being a dependent is a loss. He really seemed to want me to work long hours. I had said I wanted to work, so I couldn't argue much. But I was anxious since I hadn't worked for many years. Even if I decided to work full-time, I wanted to gradually get used to it. Quitting because it's too hard after starting wouldn't feel right. For now, I decided to start with a part-time job of about 20 hours a week, assuming I would work full-time eventually. Michael was complaining that I should start full-time right away. But when I said I would consider it if my health allowed, he reluctantly agreed. I never thought he was so concerned about our finances. Honestly, I found my husband's interference in job hunting annoying, yet I was also pleased. It's better to live long-term with someone who thinks about finances to some extent, rather than someone who is indifferent. However, I would later realize that this perception was wrong. One day, a few months after I started the part-time job, I received a message on my smartphone. Wondering who it could be, I checked and saw a name I hadn't seen in a long time. It was my former colleague and currently a colleague of my husband. It had been a while, so I casually read the message. But what it said shocked me so much that I exclaimed aloud. "What? What does this mean? You must be joking. Long time no see. I saw your husband the other day, and he seemed really close to some woman. I thought it might be an affair, so I sent you this message." The message was informing me of my husband's affair, and it even included a photo. My heart was shaken. The photo clearly showed my husband, and he was arm in arm with a woman I didn't know. Of course, even if I knew her, being arm in arm would still be unacceptable. As I was shocked by the photo, another message came in. This woman is actually the daughter of the department head. She's also an employee of our company, so she definitely knows your husband is married. They're really bold, aren't they? I wonder if this is just how kids are these days. From my colleague's message, it was clear she was enjoying this gossip. But I replied with a thank you and closed the messaging app. I had never imagined my husband was having an affair. However, thinking back, there were many signs. Especially since he had been pushing me to work more at a time, when childrearing was not yet stable. Today, my husband was supposed to be on an overnight business trip. Probably, it was a lie to meet his affair partner leisurely. The next day, when my husband returned, I immediately confronted him. Although I knew it was better to collect evidence calmly if we were going to divorce, I couldn't pretend to be fine. "What is this about?" When I showed him the photo, my husband was surprised at first. But then he quickly regained his composure and became defiant. "Ah, I see. You knew. Well, it can't be helped. As you can see." Honestly, I was surprised because I expected him to make some excuse. The woman is the daughter of the department head. The department head is guaranteed a higher position in the future. I guess you understand from this? To put it bluntly, marrying this woman benefits me. She's younger and prettier than you. My husband looked at me as if I was stupid. I thought about apologizing and crying, considering our son Steve. So I had thought not to divorce him. However, how could I with his attitude like this? He showed no remorse for his affair. Instead, he blatantly compared me with his affair partner and said she was better. As I remained silent, my husband became even more emboldened. Well, that's the situation. I think I'll divorce you. It's a bit earlier than planned. But I was going to tell you eventually, so this is just the right time. And so, we got divorced. After being told so much, I couldn't say I didn't want to divorce him. It was better for my mental health to get a divorce quickly. Get compensation and end things. My husband paid the compensation at my asking price and transferred almost all his property to me. Naturally, I gained custody of Steve. For my husband, who was planning to marry the department head's daughter, giving away some money was probably nothing to him. In fact, when he was leaving the house, he left me with these last words. Well, do your best living in poverty. Raising a child by yourself, you'll never be wealthy. Unlike you, I'm joining the celebrities. The department head's family is rich, after all. We'll probably never meet again, but struggle at the bottom. It's unbelievable that he could say such things, even though he has his own blood-related child. I felt relieved deep down to be divorcing such a man. Mentally I felt better, but everyday life was still tough. Even though I received compensation and property, I didn't have much savings, so I needed to work hard from now on. Living on just a part-time job was not possible. Eventually, I quit my part-time job and started working full-time. I felt sorry for Steve, but after elementary school, he had to go to after-school care by himself. Unintentionally, I ended up working full-time, and both my body and mind suddenly became very strained. The new job was unfamiliar, and I had to do all the housework by myself when I got home. Life changed completely from before, and the days passed by in a blur as I was too busy. Before I realized it, 7 years had passed since my divorce. But no matter how busy you are, humans adapt. Steve has become a middle schooler and can mostly take care of himself now. Because I've been busy, he has grown up to be quite a solid young man compared to other boys his age. He even cooks and does the laundry. Thanks to him, I've been freed from both housework and parenting. And for the past few years, I've had time for myself. Both my personal and professional lives are going very well. Now I can say it clearly, it was definitely good that I divorced such a man. If I had continued to be married to that awful man, I would never have achieved this life. However, one day while shopping at the local mall with my son, I ran into that awful person, my ex-husband, Michael. I hadn't noticed him, but he approached me. Hey, isn't that you, Kim? Long time no see. You've aged quite a bit. Is that something you say when you meet someone after a long time? No person with normal sensibilities would ever tell a woman she has aged. That comment alone showed me that my ex-husband hasn't grown at all as a person. I became irritated within seconds and responded tersely. What? You look pretty old yourself. I barely recognized you. Honestly, my ex-husband really had aged quite a bit. I hadn't seen him in 7 years, but it seemed like he had aged twice that much. His hair was thinning, and he had a pot belly, a complete middle-aged look. Talking to my ex-husband felt like a waste of time, so I said, well, long time no see. But you don't really need anything from me, right? So, see you around, and tried to walk away. But it wasn't going to be that easy. My ex-husband blocked my path and started spouting nonsense. Hey, don't be so cold. We're finally all together. Let's catch up a bit. I really didn't want to hear anything about my ex-husband's current situation. The only thing I would want to say is about the child support payments. He stopped making a few years after the divorce. Child support isn't my right, it's Steve's right. Yet, there he was, daring to talk in front of Steve. But my ex-husband didn't care about my mood at all. He started rambling about his own life, which I had no interest in hearing. I remarried after that. To the daughter of the department head in that photo. Oh, he's not just a department head now, but a managing director. And thanks to that, I've been promoted to department head myself. I'm definitely on the winning side now. Honestly, no matter how much my ex-husband has climbed the corporate ladder, it doesn't affect me, and I'm not envious. All I thought was, so what? I was even more annoyed that he climbed the ladder yet didn't pay child support. It's truly stingy of a winner not to pay a few hundreds of dollars per month. My ex-husband continued to boast, ruffling my feelings even more. It really was the right decision to divorce you. You and your son are still as pathetic as ever. I make $200,000 a year, you know. Ultimately, my ex-husband just wanted to boast about himself. That's proof enough since he didn't even try to ask about our lives. Normally, a parent would be interested in their son's life, but here he was. Not even speaking to Steve, who was right in front of him. Truly an awful father. Ah, right. I should introduce you to my current wife. Hey. My ex-husband called out to a woman looking at clothes nearby. The woman came over to us, and I immediately knew who she was. I had seen her in a photo once. Yes. She was my ex-husband's new wife. This is Julia, my current wife. How about that? She's way more beautiful than you were, right? He introduced his new wife to me. What was he thinking? This woman was the one who stole my husband while we were married. I'm glad we're divorced now, but it was a shock back then, and I harbored resentment. There's no way I could have a good impression of this woman. Even a dimwit like my ex-husband should understand that much. But he must really look down on us. It seems he can't even comprehend such basic things. Ah, is that so? Are we done here? I'm not free, you know. Bye then. I said my goodbyes with an extremely displeased feeling. Of course, I didn't even glance at the woman, much less greet her. Wait a minute. As I tried to leave, my ex-husband blocked my path again. Stop it. There's no point in hearing about your family. Hey. Are you jealous because we seem happy? Don't let your poverty twist your heart too. You'll only become more miserable. My ex-husband assumed I was unhappy. It's none of your business. I'm perfectly happy, so leave me alone. The biggest misfortune recently was you talking to me. Even though I said I was happy. My ex-husband didn't believe me and pitted my situation anyway. Well, happiness varies from person to person, but poverty isn't happy, right? Don't strain yourself. If a single, divorced mother with a child were happy, there would be no unhappy people. With that background, remarriage is impossible for you. I'm just worried as your ex-husband, you know? While saying this, the expression on my ex-husband's face was the exact opposite of concerned. He was completely mocking me. When I looked at his wife next to him, she had a smug, mocking smile as well. I could never be friends with this woman. She's the worst kind, getting pleasure from looking down on others. Right? I told you. You're much better than her. Be confident. My ex-husband was flattering his current wife, comparing her to me and praising her to the skies. Well, she did help him climb the career ladder. So he's probably buttering her up whenever he can. Truly the worst kind of man. You're really the lowest of the low. I can't believe you were married to her. His wife mocked me despite meeting me for the first time. That's the worst kind of behavior in a person. I wanted to leave because I felt like I might respond if I stayed any longer. But my ex-husband stood in my way, so I couldn't move. Just so you know, we're still in love. So there's zero chance of getting back together with you. Don't get any weird hopes. My ex-husband was under some ridiculous delusion. To think he believed I had lingering feelings after he caused our divorce with his cheating. And 7 years later, he still thought so. His head was too full of fantasies, and I was speechless. As I was speechless at my ex-husband's ridiculous fantasy, he seemed to think he was right. Hey. Shocked into silence? It's tough being a man in demand. With his thoroughly middle-aged appearance, what part of him was in demand? I was beyond angry, I felt sick. As I stayed silent, my ex-husband was about to say something more. But then, Steve spoke up. Mom, why don't we fire this old man? What? My ex-husband was so baffled by what Steve said. Steve seemed quite angry, calling his own father this old man. Well, that's perfectly fine by me. What do you mean, fire me? Do you understand what being fired means? I'm not someone your mom can just fire, you know? You're in middle school, right? You should study properly. My ex-husband even spoke condescendingly to Steve. It's one thing to mock me, but it's unforgivable to insult my beloved son. Just as my anger toward my ex-husband was about to explode, I heard someone calling me. Hey, what's going on here? A man approached as he called out, and my ex-husband's face froze. Why are you here? Mr. President. My ex-husband questioned the man in front of him. Why shouldn't I be here? I'm just shopping with my family. Are you saying I shouldn't be here? No, I apologize. I didn't mean it that way. I was just wondering why you, the president, were talking to my ex-wife. Ah, that makes sense. She's my wife now, after all. What? She's the president's wife. I can't believe it. Actually, I had remarried the president of the company, where my ex-husband works about 3 years after I was widowed. I became close to the president shortly after my divorce when he approached me, while I was shopping at a supermarket. I had worked at the same company as my ex-husband, so I knew the president. My ex-husband had an affair with the department head's daughter, which led to our divorce, and then he married her. The president was well aware of this and, as a man, he seemed quite displeased by it. However, he felt he couldn't interfere with an employee's private affairs. That's when he spotted me at the supermarket and couldn't resist saying hello. I was surprised that the president remembered me, a mere former employee, by face and name, as I had been a receptionist at the company, which might have made it easier for him to remember. It seems your marriage didn't go well, but I'm sure you'll find someone much better soon. Mr. President, I'm glad you remember me. But you don't have to worry about me, I'm doing fine. At the time, I had been divorced for less than a year and was still putting on a brave face. However, the president, with his extensive life experience, saw right through my facade and offered kind words. They say divorce takes 3 times the effort of marriage. No matter how smoothly the divorce goes, it's exhausting. I haven't divorced, but when my wife passed away, I barely felt like doing anything. It's tough when a couple who once loved each other parts ways. So, there's no need to pretend you're not hurting. The president knew the loneliness that comes with the end of a marriage. Indeed, while I felt it was better to have split, I was also feeling a mix of loneliness and emptiness at the time. So his words really resonated with me. Talking about it might ease your mind. Feel free to contact me anytime. I'll always treat you to a meal. He said this and gave me his business card. I felt it was too forward to contact him for about 2 years, but as time passed, I found myself wanting to talk to someone again. Finally, I decided to reach out to the president. Despite his busy schedule, the president made time for me and treated me to a meal. When I was an employee, he was still a department head and seemed unapproachable. But having a meal with him revealed he was a genuinely nice man. Perhaps it was easier because I was no longer with the company. But soon the president and I became good drinking buddies. About a year later, he proposed to me with a serious look on his face. "You're joking, right, Chris? Don't say things like that even as a joke." I thought it was a joke since he mentioned it while we were drinking. But the president was serious. "At first, I just wanted to cheer you up after your divorce. But being with you really settles me. I haven't felt this way about anyone since my wife passed away. Honestly, you've been healing me. If you're willing, I'd like to spend the rest of my life with you. Please give me a day to think about it," I said and consulted my son. "I don't mind." "It's up to you, Mom. Decide based on whether you like him or not." Since there was no opposition, I decided to marry the president. To be honest, I liked him. I thought of him as a drinking buddy, but I also felt healed when I was with him. We healed each other, so there was no reason not to live together. And listening to him talk about his late wife, it was clear how much he had loved her. Every time I heard his stories, I felt fortunate to be marrying someone who could love me as he did. I even felt a bit jealous of his wife. Thus, we became husband and wife. The president treats my son as if he were his own. He had no children with his previous wife, but they get along so well that they seem like a real father and son. I am truly as happy now as I told my ex-husband I was. My ex-husband turned pale and trembled when he heard I had married the president. He probably never imagined that his ex-wife, whom he looked down upon as poor, would be married to the president. "Dad, this man was mocking Mom. Fire him," Steve ruthlessly told on my ex-husband to the president. "You fool." "No, Steve. What are you talking about? We were just catching up." My ex-husband tried to cover it up, but it was obvious to the president. You tend to look down on others, even at the company. I think what Steve is saying is true. I've heard various bad things about you from your subordinates. I think it's time for an internal investigation, so be prepared. My ex-husband never expected that Steve's words would be taken seriously by the president, leading to an investigation into his misconduct at the company. He apologized. "I'm sorry. I may have been a bit harsh to your wife. I apologize. Can you please hold off on the internal investigation?" Despite the crowded shopping mall, he apologized, clearly desperate to avoid the investigation. However, this act was practically an admission of his wrongdoing. The president was not swayed. "No, I'll proceed with it regardless. By the way, the executive director you are close to has also been receiving bad reviews. I'll thoroughly investigate both of you." Upon hearing this, my ex-husband's wife also apologized. Please, not him. Just this man is fine, but leave my father out of this. Hearing her words, my ex-husband immediately began to argue with her. What are you saying? Are you abandoning me? Don't mess with me. There are plenty of men like you. Of course, my father is more important. Their marital spat was indeed disgraceful. And we didn't want to be associated with such behavior. So we ignored the arguing couple and left the store. That selfish couple probably wouldn't last long after this. They had it coming. The president quickly organized a team the next day to thoroughly investigate the conduct of my ex-husband and the executive director. The findings were damning: harassment and verbal abuse toward subordinates, favoritism in personnel decisions, and demands for entertainments from business partners using their positions of power. These abuses had been ongoing for years. Using one's position to solicit personal gains was unacceptable, especially in today's age. As a result, both my ex-husband and the executive director were stripped of their positions and reassigned to regional branches. Probably, my ex-husband knew this would happen, which is why he had apologized in the shopping mall. He was aware of his misconduct. Knowing yet continuing such behavior made it even more reprehensible. His career was likely over. According to the president, both eventually resigned from the company, likely fearing retaliation from the employees they had harassed. They chose to leave. However, their troubles didn't end with their resignations. They were sued by the employees they had mistreated. Disliked by most, their numerous abusive acts were well documented, and they lost the lawsuit, facing substantial damages. The financial ruin drove my ex-husband's wife to blame him, worsening their marital relationship, which soon ended in divorce. The frequent fights and his abusive behavior might even lead to another lawsuit from his wife for damages. Watching my ex-husband's downfall reinforced my belief in living a straightforward and honest life. Meanwhile, I was blessed with a child with the president. At 42, it was a high-risk pregnancy, but our baby was born healthy, bringing immense joy. Steve was thrilled to be a big brother, lovingly taking part in caring for the baby every day. We even talk about Steve joining the company in the future. Despite the challenges of parenting at our age, seeing our baby's sleeping face makes all worries vanish. I'm grateful for this new life and ready to face tomorrow with resolve.
I stood frozen in the attic, my hands trembling as I held the faded envelope. The familiar scrawl of Ben's handwriting stared back at me, but the words inside shattered everything I thought I knew about our life together. "Mom?" Hannah's voice floated up from downstairs. "Where are you?" I quickly stuffed the letter into my pocket, my heart racing. "Up here, honey. Just looking through some old things." Footsteps creaked on the stairs, and Hannah's head poked through the attic opening. "Everything okay? You've been up here for hours." I forced a smile, hoping it didn't look as strained as it felt. "Of course, dear. Just got lost in memories. You know how it is." Hannah climbed fully into the attic, her eyes scanning the dusty boxes and trunks. "Dad's stuff?" I nodded, unable to trust my voice. Ben had been gone for 2 years, but the pain of his loss still felt fresh. Now with this letter. "Mom, what's wrong?" Hannah asked, her eyes filled with concern. "You look like you've seen a ghost." I took a deep breath. "It's this letter," I said, my voice trembling. "Your father, he had another son." Hannah's face went pale. "What? That's impossible. Dad would never." "I thought so too," I interrupted, pulling out the letter, "but it's all here, in his own words. A boy named Daniel, from before we were married. He'd be in his 30s now." Hannah snatched the letter from my hands, her eyes scanning the words frantically. "This can't be real. It has to be some kind of mistake." It's not, I said softly. I remember now little things that didn't make sense at the time. Phone calls he'd taken private, mysterious trips out of town. Hannah crumpled the letter in her fist. So what, our whole life was a lie? Everything Dad taught us about honesty and family, it was all bullshit? Hannah, please, I said, reaching for her. Your father loved us. This doesn't change that. She jerked away from me. How can you say that? He lied to us for decades. And now you're just going to defend him? I'm not defending anyone, I said, my own anger rising. I'm just as shocked as you are. But we need to think about what this means for our family now. Hannah laughed bitterly. What family? The one Dad lied to, or the secret one he kept hidden? Before I could respond, Mark's voice called from downstairs. Mom? Hannah? You up there? Hannah's eyes widened in panic. Don't tell him, she hissed. Not yet. I can't deal with this right now. I nodded, understanding her need for time to process. We'll talk more later, I whispered as Mark's footsteps approached. Hey, what's going on? Mark asked, poking his head into the attic. Family meeting in the dust? I forced a laugh. Just reminiscing. Your sister was helping me sort through some of your father's things. Mark's face softened. Oh, find anything interesting? Hannah and I exchanged a quick glance. Nothing earth-shattering, I lied, feeling the weight of the secret already. Well, come on down, Mark said. I picked up dinner on the way over. We can eat and catch up. As we made our way downstairs, my mind raced. How could I keep this from Mark? How would this secret affect our family? And what about Daniel? Did he even know about us? At the dining table, surrounded by my children, I felt the familiar comfort of family. But now there was an undercurrent of tension, a secret threatening to tear us apart. So, Hannah, Mark said between bites, how are things with Eric? You two worked everything out. Hannah's fork clattered to her plate. I don't want to talk about it. I saw the pain in her eyes, remembering her recent struggles with her husband's infidelity. Now, with her father's betrayal fresh in her mind, I could only imagine the turmoil she was feeling. Hannah, honey, I started, reaching for her hand. She jerked away, standing abruptly. I have to go. I can't be here right now. As she rushed out, leaving Mark confused and me heartsick, I realized our family would never be the same. The letter in my pocket felt like it weighed a ton, and I knew the worst was yet to come. My hands shook as I stirred sugar into my coffee, watching the door of the small cafe. Any moment now, I'd come face to face with the living proof of Ben's betrayal. Daniel, my husband's secret son. The bell above the door chimed, and a young man walked in, his eyes scanning the room. My breath caught in my throat. He looked so much like Ben, it was uncanny. Our eyes met, and he hesitated before approaching my table. I stood, my legs unsteady. You must be Daniel, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. I'm Rachel, Ben's wife. Daniel stiffened, his eyes narrowing in suspicion. Wife? I don't understand. My father wasn't married. We sat down, the tension palpable between us. I clasped my hands tightly, trying to steady myself. I'm afraid there's a lot you don't know, Daniel, and a lot I've only recently discovered myself. His jaw clenched. What are you talking about? Who are you really? I pulled out the letter, sliding it across the table. This explains everything. I found it in Ben's things after he passed away 2 years ago. Daniel's hands trembled as he read, his face growing paler with each line. When he finished, he looked up at me, his eyes filled with a mix of anger and confusion. This can't be true. My father, he wouldn't have abandoned me like this. I'm so sorry, Daniel, I said, reaching out to touch his hand. He jerked away as if burned. Don't, he snapped. You don't get to comfort me. You had him for years, you and your other children. The bitterness in his voice stung. We didn't know about you either, Daniel. This is a shock for all of us. He laughed humorlessly. A shock? My entire life has been a lie. And now you show up, expecting what? That we'll be one big happy family? I shook my head. No, I don't expect anything. I thought you deserved to know the truth. Daniel stood abruptly, his chair scraping loudly against the floor. The truth? The truth is that my father was a liar and a coward, and you're just the messenger of his betrayal. As he stormed out, I felt the eyes of other patrons on me. Whispers and curious glances made my cheeks burn with shame. This wasn't how I'd imagined our meeting would go. My phone buzzed insistently. Hannah's name flashed on the screen. With a heavy sigh, I answered. Mom, where are you? I've been trying to reach you all morning. Hannah's voice was tight with worry and lingering anger. I'm out, honey. I had an errand to run. An errand? Mom, we need to talk about this. About him. I closed my eyes, dreading the conversation to come. I know, sweetheart. I'll be home soon, and we can discuss everything. Everything? Hannah's voice cracked. Like how Dad lied to us our entire lives? Or how you're suddenly okay with it? Hannah, please, it's not that simple. It is that simple, Mom. Dad cheated, had another kid, and lied about it, and now you want us to what? Welcome this stranger into our family? I felt a headache building behind my eyes. We'll talk when I get home. I promise. As I hung up, I noticed Daniel lingering outside the cafe, staring at me through the window. Our eyes met, and for a moment I saw a flicker of something, longing, perhaps, before he turned and walked away. I gathered my things, my mind reeling. How could I bridge the gap between my children and this young man who was such a victim as they were? And how could I reconcile the man I thought I knew with the secrets he'd kept? As I stepped outside, the weight of responsibility settled heavily on my shoulders. I had to find a way to bring this fractured family together, even if it meant facing painful truths and long-buried secrets. The road ahead would be difficult, but I was determined to see it through. For Ben, for our children, and for the son he never knew. I took a deep breath before opening the front door, bracing myself for the storm I knew was waiting inside. Hannah's car was in the driveway, and I could hear raised voices even before I stepped into the house. How could you keep this from us, Mom? Hannah's voice cracked with anger and hurt. We had a right to know. I walked into the living room to find Hannah pacing, her face flushed, while Mark sat on the couch, his head in his hands. The tension in the air was palpable. I'm sorry, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. I was trying to process it myself before. Before what? Hannah interrupted. Before dropping this bomb on us? Another brother? How could Dad hide this from us? Her voice cracked, and I could see the tears welling up in her eyes. I can't handle another betrayal right now. Mark finally looked up, his expression a mix of confusion and concern. Hannah, calm down. We need to approach this rationally. Rationally? Hannah scoffed. There's nothing rational about this, Mark. Our entire childhood was built on a lie. I stepped forward, reaching out to my daughter. Hannah, sweetheart, please. Your father loved you both very much. This doesn't change that. She jerked away from my touch. Doesn't it? He had a whole other life, Mom, a son he never told us about. How can you defend him? I'm not defending anyone, I said, feeling my own emotions rising. I'm just as shocked as you are, but we need to figure out how to move forward. Mark stood up, always the peacemaker. Mom's right, we can't change the past, but we can decide how to handle this now. Have you met him, Daniel? I nodded, feeling a lump form in my throat. Yes, this morning. He didn't know about us either. He's struggling with this just as much as we are. Hannah laughed bitterly. Oh, poor him. Welcome to the club of Dad's lies and disappointments. That's not fair, I said, my voice sharper than I intended. Daniel is as much a victim in this as we are. He grew up without a father, never knowing why he was abandoned. So what? We're supposed to welcome him with open arms? Hannah's voice dripped with sarcasm. One big happy family? Mark intervened, his voice calm but firm. No one's saying that, Hannah. But we can't just ignore his existence either. He's our brother, whether we like it or not. Hannah's phone buzzed, and she glanced at it, her face darkening. I have to go. Eric's waiting for me. As she grabbed her purse, I couldn't help but notice the tension in her shoulders, the way her hand shook slightly. Hannah, is everything okay with you and Eric? She paused at the door, not turning to face us. Everything's fine, Mom, just peachy. One big happy family, remember? The door slammed behind her, leaving a heavy silence in its wake. Mark sighed, running a hand through his hair. Well, that went about as well as expected. I sank onto the couch, suddenly feeling every one of my 63 years. I don't know what to do, Mark. How do we move forward from this? He sat next to me, placing a comforting hand on my shoulder. One day at a time, Mom. We'll figure it out together. As we sat there, the weight of our new reality settling around us, my phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. Rachel, it's Daniel. I've been thinking about our meeting. Can we talk again? There's so much I need to know. I showed the message to Mark, my heart racing. He nodded slowly. You should meet him again. Maybe I could come too? As I typed out a response, agreeing to another meeting, I couldn't shake the feeling that our lives were about to change irrevocably. The secrets of the past were unraveling, and I feared what other truths might come to light. But as I looked at Mark, saw the determination in his eyes, I felt a glimmer of hope. Whatever came next, we would face it as a family, no matter how complicated that family might become. I never imagined I'd be standing in my own kitchen, feeling like a stranger in my home. But here I was, watching Daniel, my late husband's secret son, fumble with the coffee maker, his presence a constant reminder of how quickly life can change. "I'm sorry," Daniel muttered, his frustration evident. "I'm not used to fancy machines like this." I stepped forward, gently nudging him aside. "Here, let me show you." As I demonstrated how to use the coffee maker, I couldn't help but notice how much his mannerisms resembled Ben's. It was like seeing a ghost. The front door slammed, making us both jump. Hannah stormed into the kitchen, her eyes blazing when she saw Daniel. "What's he doing here?" she demanded, glaring at me. I took a deep breath, steeling myself. "Daniel's apartment flooded. He needs a place to stay for a few weeks, and I offered our guest room." Hannah's face contorted with anger and disbelief. "You've got to be kidding me. Mom, how could you?" "Hannah, please," I started, but she cut me off. "No, you don't get to Hannah, please me. Not about this." She turned to Daniel, her voice dripping with venom. "You're not even a real part of this family. You're just a mistake from Dad's past." Daniel flinched as if he'd been slapped. I saw a flicker of hurt in his eyes before he masked it with indifference. "Hannah," I exclaimed, shocked by her cruelty. "That's enough. Daniel is your brother, whether you like it or not." "He is not my brother," Hannah spat. "And you," she pointed at me, her finger shaking, "you're betraying Dad's memory by letting him stay here." The accusation hit me like a physical blow. "That's not fair, Hannah. Your father." "My father was a liar," she interrupted, "and now you're carrying on his legacy of deceit." Before I could respond, Mark walked in, stopping short when he sensed the tension. "What's going on?" Hannah laughed bitterly. "Oh, nothing much. Mom's just invited our bastard brother to live with her. One big happy family, right?" Mark's eyes widened. "Daniel's staying here?" I nodded, feeling overwhelmed. "It's temporary. His apartment." "I don't care about his apartment," Hannah interjected. "I care about you choosing him over us." "I'm not choosing anyone," I said, my voice rising. "I'm trying to do the right thing." "The right thing?" Hannah scoffed. "The right thing would have been telling us the truth from the beginning, but I guess the apple doesn't fall far from the tree when it comes to keeping secrets." Her words stung, bringing tears to my eyes. "Hannah, that's enough. I know you're hurting. But you don't know anything," she said, her voice breaking. "You have no idea what I'm going through." With that, she stormed out, leaving a heavy silence in her wake. Mark sighed, running a hand through his hair. "I'll go talk to her." He gave Daniel an apologetic look before following Hannah. I turned to Daniel, who looked uncomfortable and out of place. "I'm so sorry about that. Hannah's going through a difficult time, and—" "It's okay," he interrupted, his voice soft. "Maybe this was a mistake. I should go." As he moved to leave, I felt a surge of determination. "No, Daniel, please stay. We can't keep running from this. We're family, and it's time we started acting like it." He hesitated, studying my face. "Are you sure? I don't want to cause more problems." I took his hand, squeezing it gently. "I'm sure. It won't be easy, but we'll figure this out together." As Daniel nodded, accepting my offer, I realized I'd made a decision that would change everything. By choosing to embrace Daniel as part of our family, I was opening the door to more conflict, more pain, but also the possibility of healing and growth. Looking at Daniel's grateful expression, I knew I'd made the right choice, even if it meant facing Hannah's wrath and navigating the complicated emotions that came with integrating a long-lost family member. Whatever challenges lay ahead, we would face them as a family. A new, expanded, and admittedly fractured family, but a family nonetheless. The tension in the house was palpable as I prepared dinner, the clatter of pots and pans doing little to drown out the silence between Daniel and Hannah. Mark had come over, ostensibly to help with the meal, but I knew he was here to play peacekeeper. "Hannah, could you set the table?" I asked, hoping to involve her in some way. She rolled her eyes but complied, slamming drawers as she gathered silverware. Daniel winced at each loud noise, his discomfort evident. Mark cleared his throat. "So, Daniel, what do you do for work?" Before Daniel could answer, Hannah interjected, "Why bother asking? He'll probably just lie like Dad did." "Hannah," I snapped, my patience wearing thin. "That's enough." Mark stepped between them, his voice calm but firm. "I don't like this any more than you do," he said to Daniel, "but we're family now. We have to make this work." Daniel offered a reluctant nod, and for a moment I saw a glimmer of hope. Maybe, just maybe, we could find a way through this. But then Hannah's phone buzzed, and her face darkened as she read the message. Without a word, she grabbed her keys and headed for the door. "Hannah, where are you going?" I called after her. "Out," she replied curtly. "Don't wait up." As the door slammed behind her, I felt a knot of worry form in my stomach. Something was wrong, beyond just the tension with Daniel. Mark sighed, running a hand through his hair. "I'll go after her, make sure she's okay." I nodded gratefully, watching as he left. Alone with Daniel, I felt the weight of everything pressing down on me. "I'm sorry," Daniel said softly. "I never meant to cause so much trouble." I turned to him, seeing the genuine remorse in his eyes. "It's not your fault, Daniel. This situation, it's complicated for all of us." As we finished preparing dinner in silence, my mind raced. How could I bridge the gap between my children and this young man who was as much a victim of circumstances as they were? Just as we were sitting down to eat, my phone rang. It was Mark. "Mom." His voice was tight with worry. "I followed Hannah. She's outside Eric's office, and I think she's spying on him." My heart sank. "What? Why would she?" "I don't know, but she looks upset. I think she suspects he's cheating again." The pieces suddenly fell into place. Hannah's erratic behavior, her increased hostility, the secretive phone calls. How had I missed the signs? "I'm coming," I said, already reaching for my keys. "Stay with her, Mark. Don't let her do anything rash." I turned to Daniel, who looked concerned and confused. "I have to go. Hannah's in trouble. Will you be okay here?" He nodded, understanding in his eyes. "Go. Take care of her." As I drove through the darkening streets, my mind whirled with possibilities. If Eric was indeed cheating again, it would devastate Hannah. And in her current state, with all the family drama, I feared what she might do. I spotted Mark's car first, then saw Hannah crouched behind a hedge, her eyes fixed on the building across the street. As I approached, I saw Eric emerge with a young woman, their body language intimate and familiar. Hannah's face contorted with rage and pain. She started to move, but I grabbed her arm. "Let me go," she hissed. "I'm going to show that lying bastard exactly what he's losing." "Hannah, stop," I pleaded. "This isn't the way." She turned to me, tears streaming down her face. "Then what is, Mom? How do I make this pain stop? Dad lied, Eric lied, everyone lies." In that moment, looking at my broken, angry daughter, I realized the true cost of secrets and betrayal. It wasn't just about Ben's past or Daniel's presence. It was about trust, about the very foundation of our family. I pulled Hannah into a tight embrace, feeling her resistance melt as she sobbed against my shoulder. Over her head, I met Mark's worried gaze, and beyond him, I saw Daniel approaching cautiously, having followed us out of concern. In that moment, I knew I had to make a choice. We couldn't go on like this, tearing each other apart. Something had to change, and it had to start with me. "We're going home," I said firmly. "All of us. It's time we faced the truth. All of it together." As we walked back to our cars, I felt the weight of the decision I'd just made. The road ahead would be difficult, but it was the only way forward. It was time to confront our past, heal our present, and forge a new future. As a family, I stood in my kitchen, surrounded by the chaos of last-minute preparations for our family gathering. The air was thick with tension, and I couldn't shake the feeling that something was about to explode. Hannah burst through the door, her eyes wild and her hair disheveled. "Mom, I need to talk to you. Now." I set down the platter I was holding, my heart racing. "What's wrong, sweetie?" She glanced around nervously, then lowered her voice. "I have proof. Eric's been cheating on me again. I'm going to expose him tonight in front of everyone." My blood ran cold. "Hannah, no, this isn't the way to handle it. Let's talk about this." "Talk?" she scoffed. "That's all we ever do. Talk and pretend everything's fine." "Well, I'm done pretending." Before I could respond, the doorbell rang. Guests were arriving. The next hour was a blur of greetings and forced smiles. I watched Hannah like a hawk, terrified of what she might do. Daniel hovered awkwardly on the periphery, while Mark tried his best to keep conversations flowing. Eric arrived late, looking nervous. Hannah's eyes locked onto him, and I saw a dangerous glint in them. As everyone gathered in the living room, I cleared my throat. Thank you all for coming. I know it's been a difficult time for our family, but I hoped we could use this opportunity to... Oh, cut the crap, Mom, Hannah interrupted, standing up. You want to talk about difficult times? Let's talk about how my husband has been screwing his secretary for months. A collective gasp rippled through the room. Eric paled, stammering, Hannah, what are you? You thought you could get away with this? Hannah yelled, throwing a file of incriminating photos across the room. Everyone will know who you really are. The room erupted into chaos. Eric lunged for the photos, guests murmured in shock, and I stood frozen, watching my carefully orchestrated evening crumble. Hannah, please, I begged, finding my voice. This isn't the time or place. When is the time, Mom? She screamed, tears streaming down her face. When Dad was alive and lying to us? Or now, when his bastard son is living in our house like nothing happened? Daniel flinched at her words, and I saw Mark step protectively in front of him. That's enough, I shouted, surprising even myself with the force of my voice. Everyone, please, just calm down. But it was too late. The dam had broken, and years of pent-up resentment and secrets came flooding out. You knew, didn't you? Hannah accused, turning on me. You knew about Dad's affair, about Daniel, and you never said a word. I didn't know, I protested weakly, but doubt gnawed at me. Had there been signs I'd ignored? Eric, seeing an opportunity to deflect, jumped in. This is rich, coming from you, Hannah. You want to talk about affairs? Why don't you tell everyone about your little fling with your college professor last year? The room fell silent, all eyes turning to Hannah. She looked like she'd been slapped. Is that true? I whispered, feeling like the ground was crumbling beneath my feet. Hannah's face crumpled. I was lonely. Eric was always working, and... So it's my fault? Eric sneered. You're no better than me, Hannah. No better than your father. Don't you dare compare me to him, Hannah screamed, lunging at Eric. Mark intercepted her, holding her back. Hannah, stop. This isn't solving anything. As I watched my children grapple with each other, surrounded by the shocked faces of our friends and family, I felt something inside me break. This was my fault. I'd let secrets fester, ignored the signs of trouble, all in the name of keeping the peace. Enough. The voice that cut through the chaos wasn't mine. It was Daniel's. He stood in the center of the room, his face a mix of anger and determination. Look at yourselves. You're tearing each other apart over lies and betrayals. Is this what family means to you? His words hung in the air, heavy with truth. I looked around the room, at the hurt and angry faces of my children, at the strangers who were supposed to be family, and I realized we'd reached a breaking point. In that moment, I knew I had a choice to make. I could let this destroy us, or I could find a way to bring us back together. But as Hannah's sobs echoed through the room and Eric stormed out, slamming the door behind him, I wondered if it was already too late. The aftermath of Hannah's revelation left our family in shambles. Guests had hurriedly departed, leaving behind a deafening silence punctuated only by Hannah's muffled sobs from upstairs. I stood in the wreckage of our living room, shattered glass and scattered photos at my feet, feeling utterly lost. Mark approached me, his face etched with concern. Mom, what do we do now? Before I could answer, Daniel's voice cut through the tension. We need to talk, all of us. No more secrets, no more lies. I nodded, feeling a mix of dread and relief. You're right. Hannah, I called up the stairs. Please come down. We need to sort this out. Moments later, Hannah appeared, her eyes red and puffy. She glared at Daniel but said nothing as she took a seat. I took a deep breath, steeling myself. All right, it's time we face the truth, all of it. No more hiding, no more pretending. What's there to say? Hannah spat. Dad was a liar, Eric's a cheater, and you, she pointed at me, you've been keeping secrets too. Our whole family is built on lies. That's not fair, Mark interjected. Mom didn't know about Daniel any more than we did. Didn't she? Hannah's eyes narrowed. Are you sure about that, Mom? You never suspected anything. I felt my chest tighten. I had my suspicions over the years, but I chose to trust your father. Maybe that was a mistake. A mistake? Hannah laughed bitterly. That's an understatement. And what about you, Hannah? Mark challenged. You're not innocent in all this either. Eric mentioned your affair. That was different, Hannah shouted, jumping to her feet. I was lonely, and Eric was always. Enough. Daniel's voice boomed, silencing us all. He stood, his eyes blazing with a mix of anger and determination. Listen to yourselves. You're so caught up in pointing fingers and assigning blame that you can't see what you're doing to each other, to this family. We all stared at him, stunned by his outburst. You think you're the only ones hurt by all this? Daniel continued, his voice breaking. I grew up without a father, never knowing why I was abandoned. And now I find out I have a whole family who sees me as nothing but a reminder of betrayal. His words hit me like a physical blow. I'd been so focused on my own pain, on protecting Hannah and Mark, that I'd neglected to truly see Daniel's suffering. We're destroying ourselves over secrets and lies, Daniel said, his voice softer now. This family can't heal unless we face the truth, all of it. The room fell silent as his words sank in. I looked at my children, at all three of my children, and saw the pain, anger, and fear etched on their faces. Daniel's right, I said, my voice trembling. We've all made mistakes, we've all kept secrets, but if we want to move forward, we need to lay everything out in the open. Hannah scoffed. And then what? We just forgive and forget? No, I said firmly. We acknowledge the hurt, we take responsibility for our actions, and we decide if we want to rebuild this family together. Mark nodded slowly. I'm willing to try if you all are. Hannah remained silent, her arms crossed tightly across her chest. Hannah? I prompted gently. She looked up, tears streaming down her face. I don't know if I can. It hurts too much. I moved to her, taking her hands in mine. I know, sweetheart, but we're family. We can get through this if we stick together. For a moment, I thought she might pull away, but then she collapsed into my arms, sobbing. I held her tightly, feeling my own tears start to fall. As I embraced my daughter, I caught Daniel's eye over her shoulder. He stood awkwardly to the side, uncertainty written across his face. I extended my hand to him, inviting him into our circle. Hesitantly, he stepped forward and Mark moved to include him. For the first time since this all began, I felt a glimmer of hope. We were broken, battered by secrets and lies, but we were together. As we stood there, holding on to each other, I realized this was just the beginning. We had a long, difficult road ahead of us, but for the first time I believed we might actually make it through, as a family. The weeks following our confrontation were a delicate dance of healing and hurt. Each day brought new challenges but also small victories. I watched my family, once fractured, slowly begin to mend. Hannah was the first to take a concrete step. One morning, she approached me, her eyes red-rimmed but determined. Mom, I think I need help, professional help. I felt a surge of pride and relief. That's very brave of you, sweetheart. I'll help you find someone. As Hannah started therapy, I noticed subtle changes. The sharp edges of her anger began to soften, replaced by a quiet introspection. She and Eric had decided to separate, but for the first time, I saw her facing the future with strength rather than bitterness. Mark threw himself into work, but also made time for Daniel. I'd catch them talking late into the night, their voices low and earnest. Slowly, a tentative brotherhood began to form. Daniel remained a constant presence, his quiet determination to be part of the family, both heartwarming and heartbreaking. I found myself drawn to him, seeing echoes of Ben in his mannerisms and smile. One evening, as we all gathered for dinner, a new weekly tradition we'd started, I looked around the table and felt a wave of emotion wash over me. We'd been through hell, but here we were, still standing, still trying. I have something to say, I began, my voice trembling slightly. All eyes turned to me. We've been through hell, but we have to find a way to rebuild. Family means forgiveness and growth. Hannah nodded slowly. I'm trying, Mom. It's not easy, but I'm trying. We all are, Mark added, glancing at Daniel. Daniel cleared his throat. I know I'm still new to all of this, but thank you for giving me a chance to be part of this family. I reached out, taking Daniel's hand in mine. You've always been part of this family, Daniel. We just didn't know it yet. Hannah hesitated, then extended her hand to Daniel as well. I'm sorry for how I treated you before. You didn't deserve that. As Daniel took Hannah's hand, I felt tears spring to my eyes. It wasn't perfect, but it was progress. I have an idea, Mark said suddenly. Why don't we go through Dad's old things together? Maybe we can all learn more about him, the good and the bad. The suggestion hung in the air for a moment. Then, to my surprise, Hannah nodded. I'd like that. We spent the rest of the evening in the attic, sifting through boxes of Ben's belongings. There were moments of laughter as we uncovered old photographs and mementos, and moments of tension as we confronted reminders of his secrets. As I watched my children, all three of them, piece together the complex puzzle of their father, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. We weren't hiding anymore. We were facing our past, together. "Mom, look at this," Daniel said softly, holding out a small notebook. It was Ben's journal from the year Daniel was born. With shaking hands, I opened it. Ben's familiar handwriting filled the pages, detailing his struggles, his regrets, and his love for all his children, including Daniel. He wanted to tell us, I realized, my voice barely a whisper. He was trying to find a way. We huddled together, reading Ben's words. There were tears and angry outbursts, but also moments of understanding and forgiveness. As the night wore on, I looked at my family, battered and bruised, but healing. We had a long way to go, but for the first time, I truly believed we would make it. "We've been through hell," I said, echoing my words from earlier, "but we're finding our way back. Together." Hannah leaned her head on my shoulder, while Mark and Daniel exchanged a look of newfound brotherhood. In that moment, I felt Ben's presence, not as a source of betrayal, but as a reminder of the love that had brought us all together. We were a family redefined, shaped by secrets and lies, but ultimately bound by love and the choice to forgive. As we descended from the attic, arms linked and hearts lighter, I knew that whatever challenges lay ahead, we would face them as one. The path to healing was long, but we had taken the first steps together. And in the end, that's what family is all about.